Welcome back, everyone. For this session, we have a great keynote interview titled From Inspiration to Aspiration, Experiencing the World of Work Through Role Modeling and Role Play. Joining us for this interview is Professor Dr. Ger Graus, OBE, Global Director of Education, Kidzania, and moderating the session is Dr. Zara Al-Rawahi, CEO of Artificial Intelligence Academy. I'd like to remind our audience that they can send their questions using the chat feature, and if there is time, our speakers will do their best to answer them. Thank you for turning your speakers and microphones on, speakers. Dr. Zara, over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome all of you to EduTech Arabia. As you mentioned, during this, we're going to have a keynote interview with Professor Dr. Ger, who is the Global Director of Education, Kidzania, United Kingdom. And it will be mainly about experiencing the world of work through gamification, role play, and role modeling, etc. Professor Ger, it is so nice to meet with you today. And I would really appreciate if you could kindly give us a brief introduction about yourself, your experience on this area. It would be glad for the audience to hear about who we have with us today, especially your experience with Kidzanias and related to role play and role modeling, simulated learning. Go ahead, Professor Ger.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Zara, and I'm very pleased to be with you. So I'm Ger Graus. I'm the global education director for Kidzania. I'm also a visiting professor at the National Research University in Moscow, and I advise several organizations and companies globally on education. I started off as a teacher many years ago. I grew up in the Netherlands, moved to the United Kingdom, started off as a teacher, and I've always remained one. But I think what my journey has taught me is that over the years, the distinction between education and schooling has become more and more important. And what we've seen over the years is a narrowing of an approach through schooling and testing. So we have a very narrow curriculum that becomes even narrower as we speak, and we test at every given point. And actually what we've done over time is we've removed schooling from the reality of education, which is much wider. And therefore, I kind of moved into the value of out of school learning in order to give purpose and reality to the in-school teaching. And that led me from being a teacher to being an inspector, an advisor, to an education director, to becoming the founding CEO of an NGO called Children's University. And then some years ago, I started with Kidzania first in the UK and then globally to look at what is it that these out-of-school experiences can contribute, what value can they add to the learning experience of each individual child in the school. And so that's been my journey over a long time, and I'm very happy to share some of those findings. Finally, it is worth saying that every pronouncement that we make in the interest of children must, of course, be evidence-based rather than emotionally or politically driven.
Oh, that's really great. So you came from the background of being a teacher to being an inspector to being a director of this type of modeling of learning. So bringing the gap between education and entertainment, how can you find the right balance between fun and education for children?
That's a very interesting question on a number of points. So if I please may continue the theme that we need to distinguish between schooling and education, between places where children are taught something that is pre-described through often a national curriculum and that is tested, and the education which is much wider and lies in museums, galleries, and all sorts of experiences, including Kidzanias. What puzzles me about the question, and I'm asked the question a lot, is that what is the right balance between fun and education? That question assumes that education can't be fun, and that's a very sad thing, I think. So I think I would like to kind of, in my mind, rephrase the question between what is the right balance between experience-based learning and what goes on in school. And the fun be both in school and should be outside of school, because otherwise I think we're probably on a loser. And I think what out of school experiences, good, positive, planned, teachable moments, what they bring are why answers. They give purpose. So I travel all over the world. I ask lots of children, why do you go to school? And far too often, the answer I receive is because I have to. I think there are better answers. And I think it is not for us as adults or teachers to give those answers to the children. I think it is up to us to place those children in situations to facilitate the experiences whereby they find these things out for themselves. So the link is in essence, the out of school experiences and the in-school experiences is about theory into practice. It is, if you wish, the appliance of science. And it is to put our children in a position whereby they realize themselves that learning is a satellite navigation system to better places in life. Children need to be able to write their own narrative of the possible through this free range learning that we provide out of school, through this notion of self-initiated, self-directed and self-sustained learning. So the link is about the child. The bridge is about the child, and it is about making sense of it all and the child being in a position to make sense of it all.
Okay, that's great. That's really, so it is about the child getting the right experience of learning and the mean of learning itself. That's really great. So why is the role play, which is an approach to teaching and learning, that's receiving greater attention these days, especially simulated type of learning, experience learning, role play of learning, and how does it help children development?
I think that there are probably a number of aspects to this, and I'd like to kind of unpack these. I think firstly, I think we've reached probably the point whereby we realize that that definition of insanity is not a very good one. The insanity that is, we keep doing the same things and have been doing in schooling for decades and decades and decades and decades. We keep doing the same things, but we're expecting different outcomes. So the world has moved on, but we still have 25 children in a classroom facing the front. There is a whiteboard now instead of a blackboard. There is a teacher at the front. We still use the textbooks, and we expect that we move with the times automatically. I think the other thing is that the kind of the teach and test model may well have got us to a point where lots of children pass examinations, but we've lost the sense of purpose. And also, I think we need to realize that role play doesn't stand on its own within this. Role play and role modeling go hand in hand. So in many ways, particularly at a younger age, what we see in children is copied behavior. And I'm very pleased to say, one of my sidelines, so to speak, is I'm an advisor to Raise Your Children, to the foundation Raise Your Children in Italy, which of course has a very heavy focus on early years, but has a very strong focus on using environments and role models as teachers. And I think what we are seeing is a recognition how good this early years provision is, and that it actually is relevant at other stages as well. So put all of that in a mixing pot, and you have role modeling that leads to role play that is fun, that is experiential, that puts children in charge of those experiences to a very significant degree, and that makes that connect between role model and role play. So in terms of the work-related learning, I advocate strongly that we stop asking children what they want to be when they grow up. I advocate strongly that we ask children who they want to be when we grow up. And we need to, in order to help children achieve those things, we need to get to know them much better. So I'll give you a very simple example. There was a piece of research done, commissioned by First Choice in 2017, and they took a segment of children aged 8 to 12, and they asked them which jobs they wanted to pursue when they were grown up. And the answer in 2017 were vloggers, bloggers, YouTubers, all the kind of high-tech new professions. 83% of children in total wanted to be one of those. And then without any interference except from outside and events overtaking things, that exercise was repeated with a similar group of a similar demographic in 2020. And of course, we were at the time in the middle of the pandemic. And what had happened was that now 73% of the children wanted to be doctors, nurses, teachers, and in a sense wanted carers, wanted to be part of the caring professions. So what we see is that outside influences act for children to seek different role models, and we need to prepare for that. So if you think about it, apart from the pandemic, little change, but a massive shift from 2017 to 2020 in terms of where the children were seeking their role models. My point in this schooling versus out of school agenda then becomes, if we purely teach and test, we don't know our children well enough to respond and react to those changes. And role modeling and role play and knowing our children broader and better are an incredibly important part of improving the quality of experiences of education that our children have.
Yeah, that's really great. I really believe with you. The role modeling will have a real big impact on kids' learning and as well on creating their future, actually, especially according to that research that you just mentioned. It showed and indicate the path where our, young generations, according to the scenario around the world, they can decide about their future. So now we come to really the experience of Kidzania. So how do Kidzania and other type of out-school experiences, especially the one including online, virtual type of experiences, other type of gamifications, offer a unique way that help children to get ready for the reality of the world? As you mentioned earlier, during the pandemic, the kids, they changed their, vision toward what they want to become in the future. So how this type of media, this type of learning, role play, and from your experience, like in the Kidzania or other experience that available through online type of virtual type of scenario where the kids, they'll play with it, will really affect and get our kids ready for the future.
I think before I go into this, I just wanted to highlight something else really about role play and role modeling, and it is linked to your question.
Yes.
Schooling and education is not just there to get people into jobs. We are actually schooling and educating children to become better people. So it is, in my view, first and foremost, a matter of values and principles, and of the heart as well as the head. And so role modeling in that sense is not just about copying the doctor or copying the nurse, but role modeling is also about doing the right thing and being good people. And I think in these quite troubled times in which we find ourselves globally, role modeling goodness and kindness, I think, is incredibly important and must go along all the other educational objectives at least as important, and we must not lose sight of this. So the Kidzania and other out of school experiences, including online, and you're quite right to raise that, So in terms of Raise Your Children, the big mantra is the environment is the third teacher. After the other children and the adults, the environment is the third teacher. And of course, the environment includes the virtual environment. Now, there are clearly issues of balance. One wouldn't want the virtual environment to be the only environment, but it must be included as part of the package. And I've alluded earlier that this experience-based learning, this free-range learning, is incredibly important from a child's point of view to make sense of the world and to connect that being taught and learning, free-range learning agenda. And therefore, organizations that give themselves the title educational, or that gives themselves that relatively new title, edutainment, have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to think about those things and to behave properly and to report back their findings so that they can be shared. And I'll give you an example of this, and I think it shows the kind of influence that out of school hours learning, edutainment, the responsibilities that they can have. So some years ago in Kidzania, we undertook a piece of research, and I discussed with analysts to look at what are the first choices children make. When they come to Kidzania, if you wish, what is the first job they choose? I took a huge global sample of some 600,000 children across 5 or 6 countries, from India to Mexico to Turkey to the United Kingdom and Dubai. And the important bit about the Kidzania visit, of course, is that whilst inside, adults are there to be seen and not heard, i.e. they're not meant to be influencing the choices the children make. Anyway, so we got 600,000 choices. We then segmented and placed the children in their different groups. Were they boys, were they girls, were they 4, were they 14, were they rural, were they urban, which country were they from, and were they rich or were they poor? And we found a number of key findings. So the first key finding was that all stereotypes started at the age of 4. So if you went into the aeroplane, the pilots were all boys and the cabin crews were all girls, for example, wherever in the world we were. The second finding was that there was almost no change between the age of 4 and 14, despite all this STEM investment that supposedly takes place. The other finding was that almost all girls, regardless of their background, choose activities below their age range. And the final finding is that children can only aspire to what they know exists. If you come from a deprived background with limited experiences, you will not choose to be a surgeon. You will choose to be the window cleaner. So we took those findings and we shared those findings. As an entertainment company, we took those findings and we shared those findings with OECD, the Council of Europe, various governments across the country. I speak at conferences globally about this. And this is what I see as edutainment, having a responsible attitude. And that is the role it should play. That is the role Kidzanias and others should play to contribute to the greater good.
Oh, that's really great. That's really great. To wrap up our discussion, actually, we left with only a minute and a half. So where do you see education and entertainment in the next 5 years?
I see them increasingly overlapping with purpose. I see schools getting better at using the entertainment as a facility for learning, and I see entertainment getting better at working directly with schools. I also see them both agreeing that it is not just about the practicalities of testing and teaching, but it is about the practicalities that come from the thinking that experience is everything, and that will make for better people and a better world.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Geer, for your insights on the experiencing the world of work through gamification, role-playing, role modeling. And thank you for all the attendees for attending this session. Actually, we have one question, if you could answer. The time is over. So all of you have a nice, enjoyable day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you both for that insightful session. I think the audience have been left with a lot to think about after that, which is great. And to our audience, please make sure to join the panel starting shortly, titled Driving Digital Transformation Journey Within the Education Sector. And to everyone else as well, please make sure to visit the group chat functions and to join in with the discussions happening there. Thank you again.